Hello, it's Sarah from Hardcover Hearts, and I'm here today with our week 3 check-in of The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. We are reading this. It's myself and Juan of Just Juan Reader, and we're reading this with a few great people, and we wanted to open it up for anyone who wasn't on Voxer to join in as well. And so feel free to join in and add your thoughts on up to chapter 9, which is where we're reading it at this stage. So we read chapters 6 through 9 in this edition. I will say, as I've said before, if you plan on reading this and have not read this, we will talk about spoilers. So we are not saving anything. This is a deep discussion. So hold this and stop. Come back to it later after you've read it. So let's get started. I'm not going to do a summary like I did in the last 2 chapters because, or at least to get us to where we are, because it's just going to get longer and longer. So suffice it to say, when we open this chapter, and the chapter is Wind, Sand, and Stars, a very beautiful title for the chapter, Theo is in Vegas. He's still in Vegas with his father and his father's girlfriend, Xandra, with a X, not a S. And while he's been having this delinquent, romantic kind of bon vivant life, albeit completely poor, but kind of doing what he wants, going to school when he wants, drinking a lot, taking drugs, spending tons of time with his best friend Boris. All of a sudden, it gets a little more complicated in this chapter. So in chapter 6, Boris finds a girlfriend, and it's a girlfriend that Theo does not like. He doesn't like her. She's a little older, she's a little wilder, and which says a lot considering how wild Boris is. And so he's feeling torn. It's making him question his feelings for Boris, which are very romantic. Boris and he have a relationship that's very intimate. They're constantly together. They share a lot, they talk a lot, they open up to each other. Both have lost their mothers. Both have really shoddy fathers and in different ways. Both are kind of left to their own devices, and they're both very intelligent. So they have a lot in common, and they're both outsiders in this environment. One thing that comes out in this section is that he and Boris have also engaged in some sexual activity together, that they get themselves so inebriated, fool around, and then don't talk about it. But there's a tenderness and a beauty there in that they hold each other and fall asleep next to each other and snuggle up to each other. So for someone like Theo, who has been so emotionally devastated by the loss of his mother, by having to everything that's good that's happened to him has been ripped away. He got ripped away from the barbers to come to Vegas. He had to leave behind the one place that gave him some intellectual curiosity and artistic interest, which was Hobby's place. So he needs something, and Boris is filling a void, or was filling a void until he found his girlfriend. And so I think it's creating a lot of confusion. At this exact same time, though, his father starts getting a little closer to him and starts hanging out with him and trying to be a friend to him, kind of chumming up. And you can just tell that he's wanted this. He's wanted to spend time and to get to know his father, if his father is in a right state. If his father is not drunk, and if his father is, so there's still a bit of hesitancy and suspicion on the part of Theo as he's spending time with his father, a little bit of distance because of past wrongs and past behavior. His father comes up, like out of the blue, comes up with this idea that, hey, I'm flush right now, so why don't you give me your social security number and I'm going to set up an account for you. I'll go ahead and do that. I just need your social security number. And I think the reader recognizes this as a red flag. I'm curious, one of the questions I'd love to ask was, do you think Theo considered it a red flag? Or do you think that it didn't dawn on him what the Social Security number could be used for? And all of a sudden, it kind of, you get get the feeling that something's happening in the background. Something's going on with his father. A gentleman shows up at the house one day when it's just Theo, and his name is Mr. Silver, and he doesn't come in, but he wants a message to be sent to Theo's father, that he's got five on him. There's some phrase, there's some specific phrase that he's supposed to relay to the father, and basically he's a loan shark, and the father is in debt to him, and he's looking for his payment. This point, as this point in the book came up, it reminded me just how masterful she is with the names. So just like Dickens, names are very important here. So very interesting, the loan shark being named Mr. Silver. We have Xandra, who loves her pills. So that's a great one. The Barbers, kind of like a safe harbor, but is what I think about when I think of the Barbers and the way it's spelled. So she's just a great, she really, Boris, this very strong Russian name. Pippa, Leo, from A Little Book Life, mentioned in our Voxer that Pippa is a reminiscence of Pip from Great Expectations, which is, we know that there's a lot of Dickensian style being put in play here. So Mr. Silver comes bearing some news. Theo doesn't really know what's happening, but relays the information. Along this, at the same time, you see that he's starting to really obsess about this painting. And so he pulls it. This is really the first time he's starting to interact with the painting since he's had it. I think he's had other things to take his mind off of it. And so, running around with Boris, getting into all kinds of shenanigans, exploring the Vegas cul-de-sac, abandoned cul-de-sacs of the suburbs. But now he doesn't have Boris, and he's left alone a lot. And so he takes out this painting, and you can see that the painting is almost like a touchstone for him, something that keeps him connected to his mother and keeps him connected to what she loved. And there's beautiful, beautiful passages about the light and how the light, the Vegas light, really illuminates this painting. And so he's coveting it, he's protecting it, he puts layers and layers and layers of protection around it. He worries about where it is. Would someone come and get it? If someone walked into dust, to clean it, he starts to become scattered and nervous. Then there's a scene where his father comes home, and his father is absolutely in a panic. And so this is after Mr. Silver has visited. And he said, hey, he's got this plan. He needs to make money. He's got an opportunity to go in on a restaurant, but he needs some funds. And so he needs Theo to do him a favor. He needs to get on the phone, and he'll tell him what to say. And to Theo and to the reader, it feels rushed. There's panic. There's purposeful obfuscation of what the purpose is. And he says, you've got some money. Your mother has some money. So you need to call this lawyer, and I'll tell you what to say. So the father is on one end of the phone. Theo's on the other end of the phone. And the lawyer tells him, oh, well, that's for your college education. That's held up. Yes, we can absolutely give some of that money out. His father was trying to say, oh, well, they wanted to send him to a school. First thing that Theo's ever heard of this. And so the lawyer who actually says, there's been some strange things that have happened. And no, we wouldn't be able to do that, even though I think it's a great idea. we can't give you that amount of money. We can give you a smaller amount of money, but I would need the receipts. I would need to talk to the school that you're going to go to. We would need to do all the paperwork. It's very legal, very complex. So he throws up all these bureaucratic walls to prevent what he suspects is happening, which is that the father is trying to get Theo's money. When that conversation ends with no money being given out, the father is distraught, absolutely broken. Theo doesn't know what to do, feels like he's let his father down, but also starting to maybe put together what's happened, that his father was going to steal from him. He goes up into his room, and there's a passage about the howling of an animal, and he realized that was his father, and he'd never heard kind of the anguish in those cries like that. Then it's immediately after he goes out with Boris, and Boris has access to some acid, and they trip. And so already Theo is in a really difficult state of mind. He's already confused. He's already upset. Boris is upset because he doesn't trust his girlfriend, and so he plants the seed that let's leave, let's run away. And that just absolutely appeals to Theo's sensibility, or at least it plants a seed there. They come back after this night of wandering and being at a playground. They come back, and Xandra comes running in the house and basically tells them that his father is dead. His father was in a car accident, and he had started drinking again, and his blood alcohol is very, very high. And it's also said that the car was leaving Vegas when the crash happened. So, second question for the readers. Juan had asked this on Voxer, or I think even maybe in Voxer or on his channel. Was it purposeful? Was he committing suicide? Or was it just that he was so destructive and such a bad person that he was guilty for leaving, but he wanted to leave to save himself, and so he got himself drunk, and then it was just a freak accident as he was running. That's a question. So next thing you know, he's realizing that he's in the exact same predicament that he was in when he was in New York, and his mother had died. That he needed to figure out something for him to do, because the social services were going to come for him, and he'd be put in foster care. And he does not want to be put in foster care. So the idea of running away pops back into his head. Xandra is she's popping every pill she has. She's just in massive grief. And so Boris is over there. They put her to bed. She is out. She took something, and so she's out. So they rifle through her things. They find some earrings that were his mother's, that the father had stolen from the mother while he was still married to her, and had actually given to Xandra. So very, very sad thing to find, that your father was a thief and had given it to this woman. So that, very upsetting. He also finds a bunch of money and a bunch of drugs. So Boris takes the drugs. Theo takes the money, tries to convince Boris, come with me, let's go to New York, let's go. Ironically, he also takes the dog, Popper, this obnoxious dog that is girly and annoying, and Xandra's dog, but he's formed an attachment, and he feels a responsibility. So good point for Theo on that, to assume responsibility for this dog, knowing that Xandra is not capable. So he has a parting with Boris, because Boris tries to convince him to stay. And he starts to have this conversation. It's very stilted. It's very strange. It feels like he was about to tell him something and then pulls back. Tells him, wait another day. Don't do, and tries to get him to extend his time a little bit. But Theo knows that time is up. If they know that the father has died, they're going to come and try to find out what's happening to him. And so he has to go, and this is his window. But Boris gives him a mobile phone, and they're going to communicate that way. So he gets in a taxi, and there's a great scene of this taxi driver who was a former musician, or maybe current. I was going to say musician. That's not the word. Magician. He's a magician, and he teaches him a little bit about how to fake your eye, and how to divert attention so he can sneak this dog on the bus. So he does that, and then he takes this very very beautiful, very desolate, very anxiety-ridden trip across the country, where he has this bag that he's put the dog in, and he's still coming off of these drugs that he's taken. He's trying to process. He's grieving. He's scared, and he's on his way back to who knows what. So that's where. So we end up this portion of the chapter with his arriving in New York City. He's walking around. He runs into Mr. Barber, his childhood best friend's father, a man who has taken them in, and it's very clear that something's gone very wrong. He's known to have had some psychotic splits before, but he doesn't recognize him. Now, in all fairness, Theo's really dirty. He doesn't look like himself. It's been a year and a half, almost 2 years, and he probably, given how he approached him, could have been seen as a homeless man or a homeless kid. But still, there's no identification of Theo as who he was. So immediately Theo realizes he can't go to the barber. Something's not right there. Something's gone wrong. So he finds himself down, and he knocks on the door to Hobby's, and it looks like the place is a little more bedraggled, and maybe they're not there anymore, and he's a little afraid that maybe he's moved, maybe they're not there anymore. And then Pippa opens the door, and that leads into the next section, which is the shop behind the shop. And this, for all the anxiety and all the pain and all the sadness that exists in the Vegas chapters, this is the chapter where the comfort is returned, and everything that was lost is found again, which is a loving environment, a place that he can rest, a place that he can come into his own, and he can be inspired to something more, and surrounded by people who care about him. He's very, very sick. He's deliriously sick. He has a fever, and he's cared for kind of through this. And Pippa is there, but we see Pippa, and it's a very interesting dynamic. So Pippa is almost stilted in her growth. Could it be because of the accident, or because she's been so sheltered? But she does things like she was going to bring him crayons to keep him busy, and so he could draw or color. Meanwhile, this is, he has grown so beyond that. He's been this juvenile delinquent, doing all sorts of drugs in Vegas, living this wild, debauched lifestyle. Coloring is kind of past that point, right? But she has this innocence, and it's an innocence with a naivete that feels off. And then at a certain point, she has to leave. Her aunt has put her in a sanatorium school, special school in Switzerland, boarding school for people who have mental challenges. And so she leaves, and she's out of the picture. He doubles down. He realizes he's got to work, and he's got to get himself back on track. And so he puts himself into focus, and he works very, very hard at studying for these two exams so he can get into some kind of school. But at the same time, he becomes extraordinarily paranoid about the painting. And this is the painting that he's brought all the way across the country with him. And he's so afraid that something's going to happen to it and Hobby's going to find it. This is only heightened when they see a news report that talks about how some of the paintings that have been lost in the museum, thought to have been exploded or ruined in the explosion, were actually stolen by a paramedic while he was in and taking care of people. And it was only discovered because he was trying to sell one of them. But they were held at his mother's home, not his own home, and his mother was going down for the crime as well. And so all of a sudden he feels this horrible sense of dread that what if he gets Hobby in trouble? And Hobby is completely innocent, doesn't even know it's there. So he becomes obsessive. So whereas before it was coveted and a longingness and a possession, now it's gone into a full obsession. He doesn't want to leave the house. He doesn't want to be away from Hobby because he wants to make sure that Hobby doesn't come into his room. He starts obsessively cleaning his room so that there's no reason to come in there. Starts to be it's definitely manifesting intensely. He also it also corresponds with a time where the lawyer, Mr. Bracegirdle is the name of the attorney that was friends with his mother that set up this trust and who's kind of overseeing it. He told Theo, why he told him this is horrible, that he could have given the money. And so there's this huge guilt that Theo has that he didn't know this and his father needed the money and he could have saved him. So I think that it's logical that subconsciously he's holding on to this treasure even more tightly now because guilt is manifesting and it's the only thing he has and he's done so many bad things. So he finally figures out in this, he also seeing how Hobby works and how Hobby, he's introduced to a whole new string of characters that are people that Hobby knows from the art world. And so he'll go with Hobby to dinners and be introduced to all of these people. And that's when he finds out that they've been using a storage facility to store all of these things, and comes up with the idea that he can find a storage space for the painting. And so he goes out and he rents gets a 2-year lease on a storage locker. And you feel the moment that he's done that and he puts the painting there, the freedom and the expansiveness of his soul. It's like a reset. It's a weight off of his shoulders, quite literally. And he's manifestly different now that that's taken care of, and he doesn't have to obsess on it. So he goes home, and on the way back to Hobby's place where he's been staying, he goes past his old building, and his old building has been demolished and is in the process of being demolished and being renovated into something different. And at that point, we realize that he's free if he so chooses to be. And so this is going to be very interesting coming into the next chapters. He doesn't have anything to hold on to and to obsess over about his old life. His mother's no longer there. The home that they lived in, the people that they knew, they're all gone. They've been absorbed into New York City, as often happens at these things. And so he doesn't have connections with the Barbers. It's just Hobby who really cares for him and wants him to do well and succeed in the world. So what will Theo do? Very interesting place to leave it. So those were some of my thoughts as I did the synopsis. I found this section to be so much better and so much more uplifting out of the destructive nature that was Vegas. My favorite scenes are always in Hobby's kitchen and his workshop, and I just love everything about that space and what that space means for Theo. There were another conversation that was important to keep in mind for what happens moving forward was he has a call with Sandra where he calls her, and just to let her know, Hobby makes him do that, to say that he's fine. And she says, I know you stole from me. And she said, you're just like your father. And I think that this plays into very much kind of the nature nurture, which light and dark sides of him, which is going to win, or is he always going to be fighting these inner demons, the inner demons of addiction and and scamming and taking the easy route and not always being truthful and honest. It'll be interesting to see. I would love to know your thoughts. Please let me know what you thought about anything I've said, as well as what your impressions of this section, these 2 chapters were. Our next check-in will be we're going to read up to chapter 10, section 6. So, in the hardcover, it's up to page 541. So we'll check in next week. And that's it for now. Thank you so much, and I look forward to talking to you later. Bye.